Thank you all for coming back and joining us again today. Today will be a little bit different. We're not going to do much coding. We're actually going to be our content will be focused on building applications, deploying applications, publishing applications, and those types of things. But we will start with some review of the exercises so far. And then we'll wrap up towards the end of the day as well, as this is the last day of the workshop for this academy in 2020, summer 2020, I guess. So to start off, just like the last few days, I will ask if anyone had any questions or ran into any blocking issues or challenges with the workshop, or sorry, the exercises so far. You can focus on the testing exercise from yesterday, but if you have any concerns or challenges that you ran into with the other exercises as well, if you're working on those, please feel free to bring them up. Does anyone want to start us off? Anybody have any issues they want to bring up?
Are they allowed to unmute? Not sure.
Ah, good question.
Normally, yes.
Yes, it is allowed.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sergio again. Good morning.
Morning.
Well, about the test exercises, well, I guess that to be sure that you are doing the things all right, you only need to watch the test tab and to see if the tests are being passed, right? I mean, because nothing is getting rendered anywhere. There is no app.js or something like that. So this is the only that you have to pay attention to, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the test exercises don't render anything. There is no React code, no app code, nothing like that. It's purely focusing on the tests themselves. When you have tests locally with your app, when you're developing, you will be running these tests in the console as well. So this is completely different from rendering the app itself. So yeah, the only tab that you need to focus on is the tests tab.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm seeing now that 2 of the tests of the exercise 1 they passed. So yeah, I didn't have time enough to do them all, but I'll try today in order to submit the link. So thanks.
Yeah, don't worry about rushing the tests. This is more about getting an understanding for how to find or how to look through the documentation, getting an understanding of how testing generally works. So you're able to write your own tests, which is why I included the solutions as well. So it's, in theory, you could just cheat. So it's not really about testing your knowledge, and you don't really have to rush with that. So yeah, please take your time and do whatever it needs to properly understand it instead of just trying to submit a valid exercise result.
Also,
Okay.
don't cheat.
Yeah.
Yes,
sure.
please don't cheat.
Thank you, Gianluca. Okay, from my side, nothing else. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else have anything they want to add or any questions they had from any of the exercises so far? Gerard, you looked like you were unmuting there. No.
Hello, hi. I think it'll be. I think you guys are going to go through the yesterday's exercises, right? Because I am having a little bit of trouble on how to do the component test using Enzyme. I mean, regarding, how to go, get info from the documentation. So I would really appreciate if you can go by if you have time. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can have a look at that. That should be not a problem. I can just share my screen and show a little bit about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so just before I start answering the question, there's one thing that I would like to mention. I already had a look at a couple of submissions so far, and I saw that some did not do all of the exercises. So for example, there was one submission where only the exercises in the component.test.js were done, and the tests in unit.test.js were completely untouched. So in this case, I will just delete your submission so you can resubmit again, and I will contact you via email. So please check your emails every now and then to make sure that you see that I wrote you an email. Okay, so let's have a look at the enzyme documentation in the component tests. Let me see if I included the docs. So this is one link to the docs. I will just open it from here. No, that did not work. Okay. Okay, so here are the docs. So in the sidebar, you can see there's a point called API reference, which is what you will be looking at most of the time. There are some guides as well. These can be pretty useful, but when using it with Jest, when you run into configuration issues, but normally you will just look at API reference. There are different types of rendering. There's shallow rendering and normal rendering. This is something that I think it was part of the, oh, sorry about that, third exercise, which was a bonus exercise. I think all the, this is using, are they all using mount? Yeah, so all the standard exercises just use the mount function, which will render the whole component and all its children, and will eventually create a whole HTML tree. There's also shallow rendering, which will only render the component that you provide and not any of its child components, which is better for performance, but the API of shallow rendering and full rendering is more or less the same. So you have different helpers here that you could use. So for example, let's just go to first. You can see a component is being rendered here with shallow, but you could also just use mount here. They are very similar in their functionality. And then you have different operations that you could do, like find, which you can find here as well. There's find here. There's first, which is the one that we're looking at right now. There's props. So for example, in this case, this component will render several foo components. They're just called foo here. So this will find an array of rendered foo components. Then this one will get the first of them. Then you can access the props that have been passed to this particular foo component, and then just access those props. So in this case, there is also a prop called foo passed to this first foo component. And then you can just do the checks. So this is child. This is not from Jest, but more in Jest you would write to be. But apart from that, this would look completely similar in Jest. So you just have to think about what you want to do when you're trying to test components. So for example, if you have a list component that renders several list items and you want to inspect the first one, you can use first. If you want to inspect the second one, for example, there should be a add with child, or you will have to play around with this a bit. It's either add or child add or nth or something like that. You just have to go through the list of these helper functions that exist and then just play around a little, which is the one that you're actually looking for. So when testing components, and it's like you're new with using Enzyme, the best you can do is just go through this list and play around with this a little bit until you get the information that you actually want to test. Does this already answer your question, or do you have more specific questions?
Yeah, that would do. Thank you so much. Also, we had to just go through the mainly API references. I think that would do the trick, I guess. Okay,
Yeah, so
thank you.
yeah, no worries. So I would encourage you to I shared with you the README with the links yesterday. Just let me open that one.
Yeah, for the unit test, it was easy to browse through, but for Enzyme, it was a bit tricky.
Yeah, it's not that straightforward. So testing components with Enzyme is a little bit tricky, and it just requires some time getting used to it, reading through the documentation and just knowing what functions you have to use in order to get the right information that you actually want to test. So don't worry about struggling at first. I still struggle with it every time I use it, because I just have to read through the documentation until I find the right functions. So yeah, this is mostly a matter of getting used to the documentation and just remembering what you actually need to do.
Thank you.
So yeah, in this HTML README document that I shared with you yesterday, which you can also find in the Academy Web App Dev 2020 GitHub repository, there are some links to the documentation, to documentations that you can use. For example, the Enzyme documentation, or for example, the Jest assertion helpers. So here you can see the Enzyme documentation. And this is the Jest documentation, which will let you know what you can use for testing. So yesterday we used to be mostly in the exercises. If you want, but for example, if you want to test functions, you can also use to have been called times. So depending on what you're trying to test, you can just go through this list and try to see if there's some comparison helper utility that you could use that will do what you're trying to do. Okay, are there any more questions?
No more questions, sounds like. I wonder if that means that everyone has completed it successfully.
Yeah, either that, or maybe you guys just need more time. If you haven't started working on the exercises yet, or you just need more time completing them. If you have questions in the future, please reach out to us, and we will definitely help you.
Yeah. Who, just let's say a raise of hands on this Zoom call, who is still working on these exercises and needs some more time? If you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom, that would be very helpful for us. A few people for sure. Okay, why don't we, yeah, so there were 5 or so, at least. Go ahead. Someone was just trying to speak.
I think it was Gerard.
No, it's fine. I was not getting the sounds and I was checking my config.
Okay. Okay, why don't we, yeah, do you want to go over any of the exercises specifically, Jan Gerka, or do you think that's good enough, and maybe we should let people to work on it a little bit and then come back in 20 minutes or something?
I think what I could do is, just as you did yesterday, a little bit of live coding. For example, solving the second exercise of the unit tests. Then let me just
share
my screen again. Okay, so this one is with the solutions. Okay. Okay, so these, let me just, I think I should be able to change this, but not save it, but it doesn't matter for now. So this is the file with the unit test exercises. I'm going to ignore exercise 1 for now and start with exercise 2. So in this exercise, the idea was to add functionality to the existing function at the top of the file. So you can see I uncommented this this particular test, and it starts to fail immediately because the functionality that's expected here does not exist yet. When we have a look at the actual code, you can see that when I pass this object with type broken to this function, then I'm expecting this function to return handyman's version. So type broken, handyman's version. And you can also see here why the test failed. And it says it expected handyman's version, but it actually got broken. So let's have a look at the function and how we can implement this. Okay, so this is the function that I also showed you during the presentation yesterday. And you can see that there are several types being handled already, which is top, mid, and low. And in this case, we need another, we need to handle also the broken type. So here I can just add if instance dot-type equals broken. Then I want to return handyman's version. So now you can see the tests are passing again. So this part of the exercise has been completed. Let's go to the second part of the second exercise. Okay, so in this case, there could be also a unusable flag or property with a Boolean value on this object that we are providing to this function, get labeled by type. And this test says that if the type is broken and there's no unusable property at all, it should return handyman's version. If the type is broken and unusable is false, it should still return handyman's version. But if the type is broken and unusable is true, then it should return handyman's version for desperates. So because you can see here, it expected this value for desperates, and it actually returned just handyman's version. These two previous cases where we don't pass a flag or the flag is initially false is already handled because we just implemented the case when type is broken. And if we don't pass in unusable, like here, this is going to be treated as a falsy value. So it will check if there is unusable, or no, it will not check if there's unusable. So we'll just ignore this for now because we haven't implemented this yet. But this case is failing here because we're expecting a different outcome. So I can go back to the function and I can add another check here and say if instance type is broken and instance dot unusable is true. So I could just omit this part. This would be exactly the same, but I just leave it here for now. then I want to return handyman's version for Desperate. Okay, let's have a look. And you can see the tests are passing again. The reason why I'm not checking for equals false is because if it's not true, it is going to be false or not present. So if it is not true, in this case, it's definitely going to be false or falsy. So I can just return this version. I don't have to check for instance unusable is false or not present. And this would complete the second exercise. Are there any questions about the second exercise that I just showed you? Okay, good. Sounds like there are no questions.
I think it was a good example. Thank you.
Okay, nice. That's good to hear.
Okay, we did have one other question. It's not related to testing, so I will, but it's a good one. And it doesn't have a, maybe not the answer that he was looking for, but I will answer it in a minute. In the meantime, I guess we'll allow people to, it looks like there haven't been that many submissions for this exercise. So I will answer this question and then we'll give 20 minutes instead of 10 or 15 until 11 o'clock for people to take a look at those exercises and continue to work on them. And if they have questions, bring them up during that time. And then at 11, we'll come back with the content. So for the question that was brought up by Mohammed, the question was a very good one. It's basically how do you do links or coordination between applications? So your interactions between applications. So for instance, if you're in a custom application and you want to be able to click a button and open a data visualizer visualization with certain data elements or that sort of thing, or dimensions, how do you do that? And there are other use cases as well. For instance, if you're looking at a visualization and you want to go into the tracker capture application or the data entry application or something like that. I hope I'm explaining your question and understanding your question correctly, Mohammed. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that is a very good question. The answer is a little bit less straightforward. The answer is that we're looking into building what we're calling an intent system that allows sort of like, for those who are familiar with Android, being able to send intents to basically perform an action in another application. And that is not in place yet. So there's no like formal way to do that in the DHIS2 platform. Each application, however, does have, oftentimes has a way to do this manually. So for instance, if you're in the data visualization application, you can press a button. I will see if I can show this. Actually, I will show my screen. So this is specific to the analytics core applications. They use a particular mechanism for this. I'm going to share my screen so I can show it. But this is, again, not built into every application. And there are some things that probably are not supported that you can't do. But if I go into the data visualization application, so let's say I open this in the data visualizer app. And then I want to, so I'm in a saved visualization currently. But now let's say that I want to edit this. So I'm going to, instead of these 6, I'm going to make this 8 different, or 10 different organization units. 9, sorry. So now I have something that is not a saved visualization. So it says it's edited. And what I can do here is, where is it actually? Yeah, here we go. So I can change visualization types. So let's say I can also change to a pie chart, which doesn't actually make sense. But let's say I change to a line chart instead of a, oops, category is empty. I'm actually going to undo that. I made a mistake. So let me edit this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe this is what you're talking about here. So I have this ability to open as map. And so if I click open as map and it, looks like there's a bug there. Let's see if this will work. Open as map. No, it doesn't like the organization unit. However, it should be possible. Let me try a different one. Let's open this one here. So let's go ahead and open this in the Maps app. So here we have, oops, yeah, here we have 2 layers, and we can basically go to each one and we can open that layer as a chart. So this is opening that layer that we were just seeing as a chart. But you'll note that this is an unsaved visualization. So somehow the Maps app is telling the Data Visualizer application what it wants to render. The way that is done here is we have this concept of current analytical object, and it's the same going in the opposite direction back to the maps. And that is actually stored in, and this is not, again, not the ideal way that we want to do this eventually, but it is the way that we're doing it now. I believe it's session storage. No, it's not storage. It is, and you could look at the code to figure out exactly what is going on. I think maybe it is because it's cleared initially when it first loads. Yeah. So basically it is passed, so the Maps app puts something into local storage, which is then loaded by the Data Visualizer application. So this is kind of a custom way that we've implemented cross-app communication. It's not ideal, and that's why we want to build something that's more formal that everyone else can use as well in their applications in a generic way. But for now, it kind of has to be independent. The other way that you can do it, and this is a little bit cleaner and nicer, is if something is saved. So if you have a visualization that is a saved visualization, like this one, you can always link directly to this URL. So you go to the base URL, which you can get from the use config hook in your application, and then you append DHIS web data visualizer, and then this hash, and then this ID. So if you know that you have a saved visualization that you want to display, you can do it that way. And that's probably the cleanest way to do it, because this URL should always get you to this saved visualization every time. So that's the cleanest way to do it today. That is again implemented by each application independently. So if you're writing a custom application, you have to add the ability to create these saved objects and to reference them in the router in your URL. That's not done automatically for you at this point. But it is possible. So that was a long-winded way of saying that you can do it between some applications today, but it depends on the application that you're talking to and what you want to do. And we're looking at building a more thorough kind of interchange system for inter-app communication in the future. Would love to hear Mohammed and anyone else your thoughts on on that approach, so that we can build in your use cases and make sure that we're addressing those needs in the system that we're going to be building, the intent system. So definitely feel free to reach out if that is something that's important to you in the future. I see another question. So there's a question about using app runtime to query an external instance of DHIS2. this was sort of asked before. It's not officially supported. So officially, if you're building a DHIS2 application, that DHIS2 application is talking to one instance of DHIS2. Couple problems with trying to talk to an external instance of DHIS2. Number one is that unless that instance you know for sure is setting its cookies in a specific way, which is not done by default by DHIS2, then it won't work in most browsers. So most of your users won't be able to use your app if you're trying to do that. You can use app runtime with a custom app runtime or app provider from app runtime. You can specify an external DHIS2 instance URL if you wanted to. But I would say that that is challenging and not supported out of the box, so I wouldn't recommend it unless you really need to. Does that answer your question, Gerard? Sorry that it's not a cleaner answer. And yeah, jQuery is basically a similar library to React in some ways. It serves a lot of the same purposes, but it does it in a very, very different way. And it's not a very lightweight library to add to your application. So I would not recommend that you mix jQuery and React. It is possible, but I would not recommend it. Okay, I think that's about all the questions that I've had come through. Anybody else have any questions that I missed or that they want to add?
I just saw that Peter was saying bonus only in the chat. I don't really know what you're referring to.
That was when we asked if they were still working on the exercises.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry.
No props. Thanks for checking.
Okay, with that, I think, yeah, it's about time anyway. So we will reconvene at the top of the hour, 11 o'clock Central European time for the session for today. In the meantime, feel free to take a look at the exercises or just get up and walk around, drink some water. And we will, and share any questions that you have that come up along the way. And we will talk about building and deploying applications, and for Baktash specifically, we will also, because it's easier to do it this way, I will be using a local environment to build my application so that you can see that that is working as well. And then, yeah, we'll also talk about deploying and publishing apps to the App Hub. Yeah, look forward to talking to you all in about 15 minutes at the top of the hour. Reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.